Florence awoke each morning like a secret, whispered across the Arno River in golden light, and echoed off cobblestone streets warmed by centuries of love and loss. The city breathed through its ancient stones and baroque balconies, and among its whispers walked a woman who belonged to none of it and all of it at once. Elena Rossi had learned how to make silence sing. At 34, she moved through the world with the careful grace of someone who had learned that beauty, true beauty, was not just about what people saw, but about what you chose to reveal. In a city saturated with masterpieces and illusions, she had become a quiet enigma, impossible to ignore but harder to reach. Born in the outskirts of Lucca, Elena had come to Florence with little more than a suitcase, a love for art inherited from her mother, and a fierce will to write her own story. She had no interest in being a muse. She wanted to be the narrator. And so she built a life around the very things others often overlooked: gesture, detail, history. Her work as a private art guide was more than a profession. It was a performance that married passion and control. She guided tourists and collectors through the secrets of the Uffizi, through the hushed brilliance of the Bargello, or to the quiet corners of forgotten chapels where stories whispered through frescoes cracked by time. Florentines knew her. Tourists admired her. Men tried to love her. But Elena had long since decided that her heart would remain a gallery with closed doors, curated carefully, its most fragile pieces kept from public view. She had been told since she was a girl that she was too striking, a term that men delivered like a compliment but wielded like a weapon. Her deep-set eyes, rich olive skin, and hair that coiled like wild ivy made her unforgettable, and yet it was her quietness, her deliberate reserve, that made people ache to understand her. She had learned that desire was a currency easily spent, easily lost. She didn't want to be desired. She wanted to be seen, understood. And that had proven to be a much rarer thing. On a morning painted in soft pastels, she began another tour at the Uffizi Gallery. The couple she was guiding, a retired pair from Oregon, were kind, curious, and content to let her lead. Elena loved those kinds of clients, those who wanted to listen more than they wanted to be entertained. She stood before Botticelli's Primavera, her voice weaving effortlessly between the brushstrokes and myths, the shadows of history and the dance of color. As she spoke, she noticed a man across the gallery. He was alone, tall and dressed with a kind of careless precision that spoke less of fashion and more of taste. His presence wasn't loud, but it was impossible to ignore. He wasn't pretending to look at the art. He was watching her, there, eyes met for a breath. He didn't smile. He didn't avert his gaze. And neither did she. Then she returned to her work, brushing the moment aside like dust from an ancient frame. She didn't think of him again until later that afternoon when she returned to her favorite café just behind Piazza della Signoria. It was her ritual. 1 espresso, 1 biscotti, 15 minutes of quiet before her next tour. But as she stepped through the narrow doorway, she paused. The man from the gallery was there, seated by the window, a cup in front of him, untouched. His eyes looked up. Their eyes met again. And this time, he smiled. It was a subtle smile, neither presumptuous nor shy, just an acknowledgement. Recognition without presumption. She hesitated only for a second before choosing a table 2 seats away. Not close, not distant. A neutral space. Moments passed. He didn't approach, didn't intrude. And that, more than anything, caught her attention. When she stood to leave, her wallet slipped from her coat. He was there instantly, handing it to her before she'd even realized it had fallen. "Miss Rossi," he said, reading from the ID on the front flap. "You dropped this." There was no flourish, no flirtation, just quiet presence. "Thank you," she said, more guarded than grateful. He didn't ask to sit with her, didn't make small talk, just offered a nod and stepped back, returning to his seat, and she left, unsettled in a way she hadn't been in years. That evening, as Florence cooled into shades of amber and bronze, Elena stood on her small balcony, with a glass of red wine, staring at the sky and thinking of nothing in particular, and then, of course, of him. He had eyes like unfinished stories. He hadn't tried to impress her. He hadn't asked for anything. But something about him had stirred a feeling she hadn't let surface in a long time. Curiosity. She didn't believe in fate. But she did. Believe in patterns, in the rhythms of art, in the repetitions of human nature. And this didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like the opening of a page she hadn't meant to write. Elena Rossi had always believed her life would be hers alone to shape, free from the expectations and interruptions of men who wanted to possess what they couldn't understand. But that night something shifted. Not because of what he hadn't said much at all, but because of what she felt. A question unspoken hovered in her mind as she drifted into sleep. Who was he? And why, for the first time in years, did it feel like someone had truly seen her, even if only for a moment? In a city where masterpieces hung on every wall, she had always known the value of restraint. But something about that gaze, that moment, whispered a dangerous thought. Maybe she wasn't done writing after all. Maybe there was more to uncover, not in the art she taught, but in herself. Elena Rossi had always believed that love was a masterpiece, intricate, layered, and timeless. But like many masterpieces, it could be misinterpreted, mishandled, even defaced. Her own experience had taught her that. Years ago, in the vibrant heart of Florence, Elena had been engaged to Marco Bellini, a man whose charm was as intoxicating as the city's finest Chianti. Marco was a rising star in the art world, known for his discerning eye and persuasive eloquence. He had pursued Elena with a fervor that left her breathless, convincing her that their union was a destined convergence of passion and purpose. Their courtship was a whirlwind of candlelit dinners, whispered promises, and shared dreams. Marco spoke of building a life together, of traveling the world in search of undiscovered art, of creating a sanctuary where beauty and love would coexist. Elena, swept up in the romance, allowed herself to believe in the fairy tale. But fairy tales often conceal darker truths. As their wedding approached, Elena began to notice subtle shifts. Marco became increasingly preoccupied with appearances, insisting on lavish preparations and high-profile guest lists. He spoke less of their shared future and more of the prestige their union would bring. Doubts crept in, but Elena dismissed them, attributing his behavior to pre-wedding stress. The illusion shattered one evening when Elena overheard a conversation between Marco and a colleague. Hidden behind a curtain in their villa, she listened as Marco boasted about securing the perfect accessory to elevate his status in the art community. He spoke of her not as a partner, but as a possession, a beautiful object to be displayed. Betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Elena confronted Marco, her voice trembling with hurt and anger. He dismissed her concerns, accusing her of overreacting and misunderstanding his intentions. But the damage was done. The man she had loved was a mirage, and the future she had envisioned crumbled into dust. In the aftermath, Elena withdrew from the world. She cancelled the wedding, returned the gifts, and retreated into solitude. The vibrant woman who once believed in love's transformative power became a shadow of herself, her heart encased in a fortress of self-preservation. She poured herself into her work, finding solace in the timeless beauty of art. As a private art guide, she immersed herself in the stories of Renaissance masters, drawing strength from their resilience and creativity. The galleries became her refuge, the paintings her confidants. Years passed, and Elena rebuilt her life with meticulous care. She cultivated a reputation for professionalism and poise, admired by clients and colleagues alike. Yet beneath the polished exterior lay a heart still bruised, wary of vulnerability. Then came the encounter with Marcus Caldwell. Their initial meetings were brief, marked by polite conversation and fleeting glances. But there was something about Marcus, a quiet intensity, a depth of understanding that stirred feelings Elena had long suppressed. He listened with genuine interest, spoke with thoughtful insight, and treated her not as an object of desire, but as an equal. Despite herself, Elena felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. She found herself anticipating their interactions, savoring their discussions, and contemplating possibilities she had long dismissed. But fear lingered. The memory of Marco's betrayal loomed large, a constant reminder of the pain that love could bring. Elena grappled with conflicting emotions, hope and hesitation, longing and fear. One evening, as they strolled along the Arno River, Marcus shared a personal story of loss and healing. His vulnerability resonated with Elena, touching a chord she thought had long been silenced. In that moment, she saw not just a man, but a kindred spirit, someone who understood the fragility of trust and the courage it took to love again. Elena stood at a crossroads. She could retreat into the safety of solitude or take a leap of faith into the unknown. The choice was hers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the city, Elena felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the shadows of yesterday could give way to the light of tomorrow. Florence had always belonged to the poets and painters, the dreamers and lovers. But on the evening, Elena Rossi agreed to have dinner with Marcus Caldwell. The city felt like it was watching them, holding its breath in that delicate moment when silence gives way to something irreversibly true. The invitation came with no pretense. Marcus had approached her after one of her afternoon tours, waiting until the last guest had drifted away before he spoke. There was a softness in his tone, not hesitant, but respectful, a man used to commanding attention, now offering it. Dinner. No expectations, just conversation, he had said. And Elena, surprised by how much she wanted to say yes, agreed. They met in a quiet corner of Santo Spirito, at a trattoria where the scent of fresh herbs and wood smoke lingered in the air like an invitation. It wasn't the kind of place tourists typically found, and Elena took note of that. So many men had tried to impress her with excess. Marcus chose intention. They sat by a window overlooking the narrow street, candles flickering gently between them. For the first time in years, Elena didn't feel the urge to shield herself behind well-rehearsed lines or polite distractions. With Marcus, silence wasn't a void to be filled. It was space, alive and generous. She learned he had grown up between New York and Paris, the son of a publishing magnate and a sculptor mother who had passed away a decade earlier. He spoke with affection but also distance, as if pieces of his story had been tucked away too long. His words were careful but not guarded, the kind of openness that came from knowing the cost of being misunderstood. "I think art is the only honest thing left," Marcus said at one point, swirling the last sip of wine in his glass. "It doesn't pretend. It either moves you or it doesn't. No negotiation." Elena met his eyes across the table. "That's what makes it terrifying too. There's no hiding behind it." His smile then was quiet and real, a smile of recognition. Didn't remember much of what she ate that night. Some warm focaccia, grilled sea bass with fennel, a lemon tart so light it melted before thought could catch up. But she remembered everything about how the evening made her feel. Understood. Not defined by her past. Not pressed to be anyone but herself. Afterward, he walked her home. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. Outside her building, she turned to him and said, "You don't ask many questions." He raised an eyebrow. "Would you prefer I did?" "No, I just noticed." He considered that for a beat, then said, "When someone's survives something, they deserve the right to offer their story on their own terms." It was the first time she realized he saw her more clearly than most ever had. In the days that followed, their meetings became a rhythm. Never intrusive, always offered like a gentle hand extended in case she chose to take it. A museum visit. Here. A walk through the old Trano there. Marcus asked to see her favorite places, not the ones in guidebooks, but the corners that made Florence hers. They went to a hidden courtyard garden behind the San Marco monastery, where stone benches rested, beneath citrus trees. They sat in silence, the warm spring air humming with bees and unseen birds, and Elena spoke about the years after Marco, the loneliness she had never admitted, even to herself. "I built a life around control," she confessed, "because if I held everything tightly enough, nothing could fall apart again." Marcus didn't speak for a long time. When he did, it was not to console, but to reveal. "I did the same. After Samantha, my sister, died, I didn't want to feel anything I couldn't contain. So I worked. I disappeared into numbers, acquisitions, success. It was easier to build walls than to face what those walls kept out." Her breath caught. "How did she die?" "An accident. She was only 24. Drowned while traveling in Bali. No drugs, no recklessness, just a wave that didn't care about the plans she made." Elena reached for his hand instinctively. For a moment he let her hold it. Then he brought it to his lips and kissed the back of her fingers. Not a gesture of seduction, but gratitude. That night, lying in bed, Elena replayed his words. His honesty didn't frighten her, it made her braver. She had always feared that letting someone in would mean losing the hard-earned equilibrium she had built. But with Marcus, she wasn't losing balance. She was rediscovering motion. One late afternoon, as they stood by the Ponte Santa Trinita watching the sun lower itself into the Arno, Marcus turned to her with a sudden seriousness. "I want to know, what frightens you the most?" he said without preamble. She thought about it. "Becoming someone I don't recognize, letting pain shape me into something small or hard." He nodded. "That's not who you are." "And you? What do you fear?" His answer was quiet. "That everything I've built won't matter. that I'll be remembered for my portfolio, not my presence. She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. Then stop building walls and start building something else. With her, Marcus began to write again. Not business proposals or investment strategies, but personal essays, reflections, letters he never sent. He let her read them, and in doing so handed her pieces of himself no one else had seen. With him, Elena began to paint again. Small canvases at first, her strokes tentative, her colors muted. But slowly something vibrant returned to her art. A confidence she had thought lost forever. She showed Marcus the first one. A shadowed figure standing at the threshold of a doorway, light spilling around her but not yet touching. "She's waiting," Elena said. "For what?" he asked. "To be brave enough to step through." He met her eyes. "She already is." In Marcus Caldwell, Elena hadn't found someone who completed her. That was never what she'd needed. What she found was someone who saw the masterpiece in her not as finished or flawless, but as alive, in progress, worth returning to again and again. Florence had always belonged to artists, and now so did she. But this time not just as a guide, or a guardian of beauty, but as a creator of love, of trust, of a future neither of them had dared to imagine until now. Spring had fully arrived in Florence, and with it came a lightness that warmed even the ancient stones of the city. Elena Rossi stood at the edge of her small terrace, a coffee cup cradled between her hands, watching the early sun break over the tiled roofs. The city was stretching, waking, and so was something inside her, a part long dormant, now stirring, with tentative hope. It had been a month since her world had quietly shifted, since Marcus Caldwell had stepped into her life not with noise or grand declarations, but with presence, sincerity and patience. He hadn't pushed, he'd only offered, and in return she had begun offering pieces of herself, unsure, cautious, but willing. This morning felt different. Elena checked her phone and smiled. A message from Marcus, brief and warm. "Lunch in Fiesole? I'll drive. Just you, me and the view." The thought of leaving the city, even for a few hours, sparked a quiet joy she hadn't expected. She typed her reply without hesitation. "Yes." "Noon?" By midday, Marcus was waiting at the base of her street, leaning against a sleek, understated car that blended more with the city's charm than his usual style. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, the kind that lingered slightly longer than usual. The drive to Fiesole was peaceful, winding through lush hills and olive groves. Florence, growing smaller behind them. Elena watched the landscape change, her hand resting casually on the armrest between them. They didn't need to fill the car with words. Sometimes silence said more. When they arrived at the small hilltop trattoria Marcus had chosen, the view was breathtaking. Florence unfurled below them like a story, its spires and domes etched in sunlight. The restaurant was quiet, tucked away from the usual crowds, its tables shaded by ancient trees. Over grilled vegetables and fresh pasta, their conversation took on a different tone, not heavier, but more intentional. They spoke of work, of travel, of the strange balance between solitude and connection. And then gently, Marcus shifted. "My father called yesterday," he said, watching her reaction. Elena nodded, not surprised. She knew Marcus's relationship with his father was complex, rooted in expectation, bound by legacy. "He wants me to return to New York for the summer. There's a board restructuring, a few acquisitions. He says it's the perfect time to reassert my influence." She heard the edge in his voice, the quiet resistance. "And what do you want?" she asked. Marcus looked away for a moment, then back at her. "I want to stay with you. Here." The air shifted between them. Not heavy, just honest. Elena reached for her glass, her fingers brushing his. "That's a beautiful answer, but is it yours or is it mine?" He smiled a little ruefully. "I've been asking myself the same thing." Later, they walked through the hillside paths, past ancient ruins and small chapels. The breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, and Elena felt the weight of the moment settle in her chest. Marcus was offering something precious, not just time, but intention. And with it came a question she hadn't dared ask herself. What were they becoming? She had spent so long anchoring her life in independence, guarding her heart like a museum piece behind glass. Yet now, standing beside Marcus under a Tuscan sky, she realized love wasn't about abandoning oneself. It was about choosing to share. The view, They stopped at a quiet overlook. The city shimmered below, golden and vast. Elena, Marcus began, his voice lower, more certain. I've built my life on control, strategy, risk assessment, but with you, none of that applies. There's no equation, no plan, just this feeling. And I don't want to walk away from it. She turned to face him, her heart unsteady but clear. Neither do I, she said. But we have to be honest about what comes next. I won't be the woman waiting on the sidelines while you fight to prove something in boardrooms that drained you before you even arrived. And you shouldn't shrink yourself for a life that doesn't fit you anymore. Marcus looked at her, and for a moment she saw the boy beneath the man, the one who had once loved books more than balance sheets, who had found joy in creating, before learning how to conquer. What if we built something different, he asked. Not to escape, but to define. Together. Elena's eyes filled with something soft and sharp at once. Hope. Fear. The fragile beauty of what might be. They didn't kiss then. They didn't need to. When they returned to the city, the sun was low, casting long shadows through the narrow streets. As they walked back to her apartment, Marcus paused before they reached her door. There's something I need to show you tomorrow, he said. Something I've been working on. She tilted her head, curious. What is it? He smiled. A step, maybe towards something bigger. You'll see. That night, as she lay in bed, Elena thought not of what she feared, but of what she could allow. She imagined not just a future with Marcus, but one of her own making. A future where she didn't have to choose between love and self, where partnership meant possibility, not compromise. Love, she realized, wasn't a storm or a surrender. It was an invitation. And for the first time in a long time, she was ready to open the door. The next morning, the sky above Florence was veiled in a soft mist, a curtain that muted the city's usual brilliance. Elena Rossi stood by her window, watching as the haze shifted with the breeze. There was a quiet energy in the air, the kind that came before something was revealed. She dressed thoughtfully, choosing a simple linen blouse and dark jeans, not knowing what to expect from Marcus's invitation, but sensing that it mattered. He arrived exactly at 10. His presence as composed as always, yet she could feel a current, running just beneath the surface. Nervousness maybe, or anticipation. Without explaining much, he guided her to the car and drove them across the river, past the familiar landmarks, up into the less traveled hills where Florence dissolved into a different kind of silence. They pulled into a gated property that looked from the outside like it had been forgotten by time. Ivy climbed up faded stone walls, and tall cypress trees guarded the perimeter like sentinels. The iron gate creaked open, and Marcus parked along a gravel path that wound toward a weathered villa. This place has been empty for years, he said, stepping out. It used to be an artist's retreat in the 60s. My mother stayed here once. She talked about it like it was sacred ground. Elena followed him inside, her steps tentative. The interior was flooded with light despite its age. High ceilings, tall arched windows, and walls that still wore the faint ghosts of murals and frescoes from another era. Dust motes danced in the air, but the bones of the space were strong, reverent. It was the kind of place that held memory, like breath. Marcus led her through the rooms until they reached one that had clearly been cleaned and partially restored. A large studio space, empty except for 2 easels, a long wooden table stacked with papers and charcoal sketches, and a corner where canvases leaned against the wall like secrets waiting to be told. This is what I've been working on, he said, his voice low. Elena turned to him, trying to understand. I bought it last month, he continued. Quietly. I didn't want to say anything until I knew what it could become. But the more time I spent here, the more I realized it wasn't just about me. He walked to the center of the room and gestured around. This place was built for artists, for creation, not commerce. I want to bring that back. A space for those who've lost touch with what art means. A residency program, exhibitions, workshops. A way to make meaning instead of just money. Elena's breath caught. I thought of you, he said, meeting her gaze. Not just because you belong in a place like this, but because you help others remember why they create. You guide them back to the why. She stepped deeper into the room, letting her fingers trail across a worn windowsill. The air smelled of old wood and something else. Possibility. You want me to be part of this? She asked. I want you to help shape it, he said. To give it voice. There was a vulnerability in Marcus she had rarely seen. This was not just a proposal of work, but of purpose. A life being redrawn. Elena stood in the middle of the studio, surrounded by light and silence, and felt something shift within her. This was what she had longed for without daring to name it. Not just love, but shared intention. A future rooted in values, in authenticity, in creating something that would outlast both of them. Later, as they sat on the villa's crumbling terrace, with tea in hand, the conversation turned personal. "My mother would have loved you," Marcus said almost offhandedly. Elena looked at him, surprised. He rarely spoke of her. She had a radar for truth, called out bullshit the second it entered. "A room, you remind me of that, of her strength." It was the first time she felt herself fold fully into him. Not physically, but emotionally. The walls she'd kept up for years seemed irrelevant now. Not because she didn't need protection, but because she finally trusted someone to help her hold the weight. In the days that followed, they returned to the villa often, each visit peeling back another layer of the past and dreaming more vividly about what the future could hold. Elena began sketching again, not for commissions or clients, but for herself. Her drawings were rough at first, then gradually grew bolder, more alive. Marcus, for his part, stopped hiding behind his schedule. He attended fewer meetings, let calls go unanswered, and focused on building the foundation for the retreat. They interviewed artisans, architects, and former residents who still remembered the villa's golden years. Each conversation lit a spark, but not everyone welcomed the idea. When news of Marcus's departure from active leadership in his family's company reached New York, the response was swift and cold. His father flew to Florence without notice, storming into the city with board members and lawyers in tow. "You're throwing away everything we built," the elder Caldwell said in a meeting Elena wasn't meant to overhear, but did. Marcus's reply had been firm. "I'm not throwing it away. I'm choosing something else. Something real." That night, Elena found him on the villa's terrace, staring out at the darkened landscape. "You heard?" he asked. She nodded. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted. She took his hand. "You don't have to. You just have to know what matters." They stood there, two silhouettes against the rising moon, and chose again. Each other, the dream, the messy, beautiful unknown. Elena had once feared that love would cost her identity. But now, in this place where art met purpose and hearts met without defense, she realized that true love didn't diminish who she was. It illuminated her. What they were building wasn't a romance built on fantasy. It was something deeper. A love with roots. And from those roots, something extraordinary was beginning to grow. The days following Marcus's confrontation with his father were a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty. The villa, once a sanctuary of creativity and hope, now felt like a battleground between past obligations and future aspirations. Elena watched as Marcus grappled with the weight of his family's expectations. His father's words echoed in his mind, questioning his decisions and challenging his resolve. The pressure to return to New York to resume his role in the family business loomed large. Despite the turmoil, Marcus remained steadfast in his commitment to the villa and the vision he and Elena had nurtured. He poured himself into the restoration, work, channeling his energy into creating a space that would inspire and uplift. Elena too found solace in the creative process. She resumed her painting with renewed vigor, her canvases reflecting the emotional landscape of their journey. Each brushstroke was an affirmation of her choice to embrace love and vulnerability. Their bond deepened as they navigated the challenges together. They found strength in their shared purpose, drawing closer with each obstacle they overcame. One evening, as they sat on the terrace overlooking the Tuscan hills, Marcus took Elena's hand. "I know this path isn't easy," he said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "But I believe in what we're building, both here and between us." Elena squeezed his hand gently. "So do I," she replied. "We've come this far together, and I have faith we'll find our way." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a letter from Marcus's father. The envelope bore the family crest, its presence a stark reminder of the ties that bound him to his past. Marcus opened the letter with a mixture of apprehension and resignation. As he read, his expression shifted from concern to determination. "He's offering a compromise," Marcus said, handing the letter to Elena. "He wants me to oversee the European operations from here, allowing me to stay in Florence while still fulfilling my responsibilities." Elena read the letter carefully, considering the implications. "It's a step in the right direction," she said. "It gives us the opportunity to continue our work without sacrificing your family's expectations." Marcus nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. "It's not perfect, but it's a start." With this newfound arrangement, they resumed their work on the villa with renewed enthusiasm. The restoration progressed steadily, and the space began to take shape as a haven for artists and dreamers alike. As the grand opening approached, Elena and Marcus reflected on their journey. They had faced adversity and doubt, but their love and shared vision had carried them through. On the eve of the opening, they stood together in the main hall, now adorned with artwork and filled with the promise of new beginnings. "This is just the beginning," Marcus said, his eyes filled with hope. Elena smiled, her heart full. "Yes, it is." The days following Marcus's confrontation with his father left the air around the villa charged with a strange quiet. It was not the peace they had once cherished, but the heavy silence of decisions not yet made. Every creak of the old floorboards, every gust of wind brushing against the windows seemed to echo with the weight of Marcus's choice to step away from the Caldwell legacy, or at least to redefine it on his own terms. Elena noticed how often Marcus fell into thoughtful silences now. He would stand by the terrace railing for long stretches overlooking the olive trees that climbed the hills below, his expression unreadable. She knew what he was weighing, the balance between duty and desire, legacy and authenticity, and she understood that no one could make that decision for him. One afternoon, she found him sitting on the cold stone steps outside the villa's main entrance, a sketchpad resting on his knees. He wasn't drawing, just staring at the blank page as if it held the answer to a question he hadn't yet dared to ask. "You're allowed to not have it all figured out," she said softly, sitting beside him. He looked at her, and for a moment, the vulnerability in his gaze made her breath hitch. "They think I'm throwing away my future. My father said I'm letting sentiment blind me to responsibility. That this place is a fantasy I'll regret." "And what do you think?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then almost in a whisper he said, "I think I've never felt more myself than I do here, with you. But it terrifies me how easily I could lose all of it." Elena placed her hand over his, steadying him. "You're not choosing between your past and your future, Marcus. You're building something new. Something that honors both." The compromise his father had offered, managing the European branch of the company from Florence, was a small concession, but it was a door. Marcus could remain in Italy, build the villa project alongside Elena, and still maintain a tether to the Caldwell name without being consumed by it. It wasn't full freedom, but it was room to breathe. They spent their evenings poring over architectural plans, selecting artists for the first residency cohort, and shaping the mission of the retreat into something that went far beyond aesthetics. It would be a place of healing, of reconnection, not just with art but with meaning. And as the vision took form, so did their partnership, not just as lovers, but as co-creators of something lasting. But Florence, for all its beauty, was not immune to whispers. At a local gala, Elena overheard two well-dressed women discussing her. "She's charming, but this won't last. You know how these things go. The millionaire loses interest when the novelty fades." The words stung more than she wanted to admit. She knew she didn't fit into Marcus's world in the traditional sense. She wasn't born into wealth. She hadn't attended boarding schools in Switzerland or art biennales in Venice. Her life was built through resilience, not inheritance. And though Marcus had never once made her feel less than equal, the world around them wasn't always as generous. That night she didn't say anything to him about the conversation, but he noticed the tightness in her voice, the way she avoided eye contact. "What's wrong?" he asked as they undressed for bed. "Nothing," she said, forcing a smile. "Elena." His voice was gentle, coaxing. "Talk to me." She hesitated, then finally spoke. "Do you ever feel like I'm a risk to your image?" The question hit him like a slap. He moved to her, cupping her face in his hands. "You're not a risk. You're the reason I'm no longer hiding behind one." She let out a shaky breath. "People think I'm a phase, a rebellion. They talk about me like I'm just something you'll outgrow. I don't care what they think," he said. "I care that you know I chose this. I chose you." In the quiet that followed, something unspoken solidified between them. Not just love, but commitment. The kind that was forged in fire, not fantasy. Elena threw herself into the final preparations for the opening of the villa. They chose the name together, Casa Luce, House of Light. It felt right. The villa had become a place of clarity, a space that illuminated what had once been obscured by expectation and fear. Marcus worked just as tirelessly, surprising even his most skeptical advisors with how effectively he managed the European operations. He refused to let go of either world. He would not sacrifice love for legacy or identity for inheritance. He was charting a new path, and for the first time in his life, he felt in control of the direction it was taking. The night before the launch of Casa Luz, they hosted a private dinner in the Great Hall, surrounded by their first cohort of artists, local community members, and a few hesitant friends from Marcus's old life. There was laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of possibility in the air. Elena stood beside Marcus, watching the room come alive. "Do you see it?" she asked him. He nodded. "It's exactly what we dreamed." When the evening wound down, and only the stars remained to witness the hush of the night, Marcus led her back to the studio where it all began. "This is where I first knew," he said. "Knew what?" she whispered. "That you weren't just part of this journey. You are the journey." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a design inspired by the wrought iron gates of the villa. Not ostentatious, not grand, but meaningful. "I know we're still building this life," he said, "and I know it won't always be easy. But I want to keep building it with you. Not just Casa Luce, but everything that comes after." Elena looked at him, her heart full, her doubts quieted by the truth of his eyes. "Yes," she said. "It wasn't about the ring. It wasn't about the proposal. It was about the choice, the daily deliberate decision to love, to grow, to create, together." And as they stood in the moonlit studio, wrapped in each other's arms, they understood that this chapter was not an ending. It was only the beginning. The opening of Casa Luz was a triumph that reverberated far beyond the Tuscan hills. What had begun as a fragile vision shared between two dreamers had transformed into a sanctuary where art and soul converged. The grand hall, once empty and cold, now radiated with warmth, filled with laughter, music, and the crackle of creative energy. Paintings lined the walls, sculptures adorned the gardens, and poetry readings filled the evenings with intimate wonder. Elena walked through the halls with a quiet grace, taking in the signs of life that now animated the space. Artists from around the world had arrived, each drawn by the promise of solitude and collaboration, of being seen not just as producers of beauty, but as bearers of stories worth telling. Marcus, meanwhile, had found a new rhythm, dividing his time between the villa and the Florence offices of Caldwell Europe, proving to skeptics that purpose and love were not mutually exclusive. But with success came visibility. And with visibility came scrutiny. It began with a magazine profile. An opulent spread featuring the couple, framed against the backdrop of Casa Luz's gardens. The article praised Marcus for his bold departure from corporate predictability and called Elena the enigmatic muse who sparked a renaissance in the Caldwell heir's life. It was well-intentioned, celebratory even. But it stirred the waters. Within days, Marcus's mother, Catherine Caldwell, announced a surprise visit from New York. Elena felt the shift before it was spoken. Marcus, usually composed, spent an entire morning at the vineyard avoiding calls. When he returned, his steps were slower, his shoulders heavier. "She's coming," he said simply, placing his phone down like it was suddenly too heavy. "Tomorrow." They had never spoken much of Catherine. A widow with sharp business acumen and an even sharper tongue, she had kept her distance since Marcus's father's death, operating from behind layers of legal advisors and PR teams. She hadn't visited Italy in over a decade. That she would now, uninvited, spoke volumes. The morning she arrived, the villa felt colder despite the sun. Catherine Caldwell stepped out of the luxury sedan with all the poise of a woman used to owning every room she entered. Impeccably dressed in navy silk, her hair swept into a chignon. That hadn't moved since the Reagan administration. She surveyed the villa with a surgeon's detachment. "You've redecorated," was her first observation, eyes sweeping over the Italian cypress trees lining the drive. Marcus greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. "Mother, welcome." She turned to Elena next, offering a hand as delicate as porcelain but not half as warm. "You must be the artist," she said. Elena nodded. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Caldwell." "I'm sure it is," Catherine replied. The rest of the day unfolded like a polite battle. Catherine asked questions that weren't really questions. "How do you find living so far from the cultural centers of art?" she mused over dinner. "I imagine it's difficult to sustain relevance," Elena answered with quiet strength. "Creativity isn't confined by geography. Often, it's in the silence and stillness that the deepest work is born." Catherine arched an eyebrow, neither conceding nor agreeing. Marcus tried to keep the conversation neutral, but the tension was inescapable. When dinner ended and Catherine retired to her suite, Marcus followed Elena to the garden where she often went to think. "I'm sorry," he said. "She's precise." "She's a mirror," Elena replied. "I see what she wants you to be." "And what do you see?" His voice was soft. A man who's already enough, but still trying to prove it to the wrong people. He looked at her for a long moment, then drew her close. "You always know how to tell the truth without breaking me." Later that week, Catherine requested a private lunch with Elena. It was not a suggestion. In the villa's conservatory, surrounded by lemon trees and the faint sound of birdsong, they sat like two queens on opposite ends of a chessboard. "I won't pretend to understand what binds you and Marcus," Catherine began, stirring her tea with clinical elegance. "But I do understand legacy. The Caldwell name carries weight, expectations." "I'm aware," Elena said. "I built this empire from dust after my husband's death. I held the line while Marcus found his way. And now I find myself asked to place that legacy in the hands of a woman I know very little about." Elena didn't flinch. "Ask me what you want to know." The older woman hesitated, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Do you love him?" she asked finally. "Yes," Elena answered without pause. "And what will you do when the villa becomes just another season in his life?" "I won't wait for that day," Elena said. "Because if Marcus walks away from what we're building, it won't be because I wasn't enough. It will be because he stopped believing in himself." There was silence between them. Then Catherine stood. "You're very sure of yourself." "No," Elena replied. "I'm sure of us." That night, Marcus found his mother in the library, a rare softness in her expression. "You've built something real here," she said. "Don't let the world convince you it's a distraction." He didn't ask what had changed. He only said, "Thank you." And for the first time in years, she kissed his forehead the way she used to when he was small. The visit ended 2 days later, with no grand declarations, no promises. Just a quiet acceptance that life, real life, was not what was printed on magazine pages or whispered in New York penthouses. It was here, in Tuscany, in the grit and grace of love that dared to defy inheritance. In the stillness that followed, Elena picked up her brush again. The canvas waited. So did the future. The days following Catherine Caldwell's departure unfolded with a newfound tranquility at Casa Luz. The villa, once a battleground of unspoken tensions, now breathed with a serene rhythm. Elena and Marcus found themselves immersed in the daily rituals of their shared life. Morning walks through the olive groves, afternoons spent curating the next artist residency, and evenings filled with laughter and quiet conversations under the Tuscan sky. Yet beneath the surface of their idyllic existence, a subtle undercurrent of uncertainty lingered. Marcus's commitment to managing Caldwell Europe's European operations from Florence had been a compromise, a delicate balance between honoring his family's legacy and forging his own path. While the arrangement allowed him to remain in Italy, it also tethered him to the very world he had sought to distance himself from. Elena sensed the weight of this duality pressing upon Marcus. She observed the way his brow furrowed during late-night phone calls, the moments of silence that followed meetings with New York executives, and the occasional distant gaze that clouded his eyes. Though he never voiced his concerns, Elena understood that the struggle between personal fulfillment and familial obligation was far from resolved. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced along the villa's pathways, Marcus approached Elena with a proposal. "There's an art symposium in Paris next month," he began, his voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. "They've invited me to speak about the intersection of business and creativity. I think it could be an opportunity to share our vision for Casa Luce on a broader stage." Elena considered his words carefully. The symposium represented a chance to elevate their project, to garner support and recognition from influential figures in the art world. Yet, it also meant re-entering the sphere of high-stakes networking and corporate maneuvering that Marcus had tried to leave behind. "I believe in what we've built here," she replied, her gaze steady. "If sharing our story can inspire others and attract like-minded collaborators, then it's worth exploring. Just promise me you'll stay true to yourself and to the essence of Casa Luce." Marcus nodded, a mixture of gratitude and determination in his eyes. "I promise." In the weeks leading up to the symposium, preparations at the villa intensified. Elena, curated a selection of artwork that encapsulated the spirit of Casaluce, while Marcos refined his presentation, weaving narratives of transformation, resilience, and the power of creative sanctuaries. Together, they envisioned a future where Casaluce could serve as a model for integrating art, community, and sustainable enterprise. The day of the symposium arrived with a flurry of anticipation. The grand hall of the Parisian venue buzzed with attendees, artists, philanthropists, entrepreneurs, and critics, all eager to engage with the innovative ideas being presented. As Marcos took the stage, Elena watched from the audience, her heart swelling with pride. He spoke eloquently, his words painting vivid images of the villa's metamorphosis from a forgotten estate to a thriving haven for artistic expression. He shared stories of resident artists who had rediscovered their voices, of collaborations that had transcended cultural boundaries, and of the profound impact that nurturing creativity could have on individuals and communities alike. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, and in the networking sessions that followed, numerous attendees expressed interest in supporting and replicating the Casaluce model. Amid the accolades, Marcos remained grounded, attributing the villa's success to the collective efforts of its community and, most importantly, to Elena's unwavering vision. As the symposium concluded, Marcos and Elena found themselves strolling along the Seine, the city's lights reflecting off the water's surface. They spoke of the possibilities that lay ahead, expanding Casaluce's reach, establishing partnerships with other cultural institutions, and continuing to foster spaces where art and humanity could flourish. Yet amidst the excitement, a lingering question surfaced. Could they maintain the authenticity and intimacy of Casaluce while scaling its impact? Would the pressures of growth and external expectations dilute the very essence that made the villa unique? Elena voiced these concerns, her tone contemplative. I worry that in trying to share our vision with the world, we might lose sight of what makes Casaluce special. Marcos took her hand, his grip reassuring. It's a valid concern, but I believe that as long as we stay true to our core values and remain vigilant about the choices we make, we can expand without compromising our integrity. Their conversation continued late into the night, weaving through dreams and doubts, aspirations and apprehensions. By the time they returned to Florence, they had resolved to approach the villa's growth with deliberate care, ensuring that each step honored the sanctuary they had created. Back at Casaluce, the rhythm of life resumed, enriched by the experiences and insights gained in Paris. New artists arrived, bringing fresh perspectives and energy, while returning residents deepened their connections to the space and to one another. The villa thrived, not just as a physical location, but as a living embodiment of shared purpose and creative freedom. Elena and Marcos, now more attuned to the delicate balance between expansion and preservation, continued to nurture the community with intention and love. They understood that the true legacy of Casaluce lay not in its size or fame, but in its ability to transform lives through the simple yet profound act of making space, for art, for connection, and for the human spirit to soar. As autumn gave way to winter and the villa's gardens slumbered beneath a blanket of frost, the warmth within its walls endured. Fires crackled in hearths, laughter echoed through corridors, and the ever-present hum of creativity filled the air. In the quiet moments, Eleanor would often reflect on their journey, the challenges faced, the choices made, and the serendipitous path that had led them to this haven. She found solace in knowing that, together, they had not only built a sanctuary for others, but had also discovered a home within each other's hearts. And so, amidst the ever-turning seasons, Casaluce stood as a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the enduring magic of dreams realized. The days following Catherine Caldwell's departure unfolded with a newfound tranquility at Casaluce. The villa, once a battleground of unspoken tensions, now breathed with a serene rhythm. Elena and Marcos found themselves immersed in the daily rituals of their shared life. Morning walks through the olive groves, afternoons spent curating the next artist residency, and evenings filled with laughter and quiet conversations under the Tuscan sky. Yet beneath the surface of their idyllic existence, a subtle undercurrent of uncertainty lingered. Marcus's commitment to managing Caldwell Europe's European operations from Florence had been a compromise, a delicate balance between honoring his family's legacy and forging his own path. While the arrangement allowed him to remain in Italy, it also tethered him to the very world he had sought to distance himself from. Elena sensed the weight of this duality pressing upon Marcus. She observed the way his brow furrowed during late-night phone calls, the moments of silence that followed meetings with New York executives, and the occasional distant gaze that clouded his eyes. Though he never voiced his concerns, Eleanor understood. that the struggle between personal fulfillment and familial obligation was far from resolved. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced along the villa's pathways, Marcus approached Elena with a proposal. "There's an art symposium in Paris next month," he began, his voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. "They've invited me to speak about the intersection of business and creativity. I think it could be an opportunity to share our vision for Casaluz on a broader stage." Elena considered his words carefully. The symposium represented a chance to elevate their project, to garner support and recognition from influential figures in the art world. Yet, it also meant re-entering the sphere of high-stakes networking and corporate maneuvering that Marcus had tried to leave behind. "I believe in what we've built here," she replied, her gaze steady. "If sharing our story can inspire others and attract like-minded collaborators, then it's worth exploring. Just promise me you'll stay true to yourself and to the essence of Casaluz." Marcus nodded, a mixture of gratitude and determination in his eyes. "I promise." In the weeks leading up to the symposium, preparations at the villa intensified. Elena curated a selection of artwork that encapsulated the spirit of Casaluzze, while Marcus refined his presentation, weaving narratives of transformation, resilience, and the power of creative sanctuaries. Together, they envisioned a future where Casaluzze could serve as a model for integrating art, community, and sustainable enterprise. The day of the symposium arrived with a flurry of anticipation. The grand hall of the Parisian venue buzzed with attendees, artists, philanthropists, entrepreneurs, and critics, all eager to engage with the innovative ideas being presented. As Marcus took the stage, Elena watched from the audience, her heart swelling with pride. He spoke eloquently, his words painting vivid images of the villa's metamorphosis from a forgotten estate to a thriving haven for artistic expression. He shared stories of resident artists who had rediscovered their voices, of collaborations that had transcended cultural boundaries, and of the profound impact that nurturing creativity could have on individuals and communities alike. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, and in the networking sessions that followed, numerous attendees expressed interest in supporting and replicating the Casaluz model. Amid the accolades, Marcus remained grounded, attributing the villa's success to the collective efforts of its community and, most importantly, to Elena's unwavering vision. As the symposium concluded, Marcus and Elena found themselves strolling along the Seine, the city's lights reflecting off the water's surface. They spoke of the possibilities that lay ahead, expanding Casaluz's reach, establishing partnerships with other cultural institutions, and continuing to foster spaces where art and humanity could flourish. Yet amidst the excitement, a lingering question surfaced. Could they maintain the authenticity and intimacy of Casaluzze while scaling its impact? Would the pressures of growth and external expectations dilute the very essence that made the villa unique? Elena voiced these concerns, her tone contemplative. "I worry that in trying to share our vision with the world, we might lose sight of what makes Casaluzze special." Marcus took her hand, his grip reassuring. "It's a valid concern, but I believe that as long as we stay true to our core values and remain vigilant about the choices we make, we can expand without compromising our integrity." Their conversation continued late into the night, weaving through dreams and doubts, aspirations and apprehensions. By the time they returned to Florence, they had resolved to approach the villa's growth with deliberate care, ensuring that each step honored the sanctuary they had created. Back at Casaluz, the rhythm of life resumed, enriched by the experiences and insights gained in Paris. New artists arrived, bringing fresh perspectives and energy, while returning residents deepened their connections to the space and to one another. The villa thrived, not just as a physical location, but as a living embodiment of shared purpose and creative freedom. Elena and Marcus, now more attuned to the delicate balance between expansion and preservation, continued to nurture the community with intention and love. They understood that the true legacy of Casaluzze lay not in its size or fame, but in its ability to transform lives through the simple yet profound act of making space for art, for connection, and for the human spirit to soar. As autumn gave way to winter, and the villa's garden slumbered beneath a blanket of frost, the warmth within its walls endured. Fires crackled in hearths, laughter echoed through corridors, and the ever-present hum of creativity filled the air. In the quiet moments, Elena would often reflect on their journey, the challenges faced, the choices made, and the serendipitous path that had led them to this haven. She found solace in knowing that, together, they had not only built a sanctuary for others, but had also discovered a home within each other's hearts. And so, amidst the ever-turning seasons, Casaluce stood as a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the enduring magic of dreams realized. The winter sun cast a golden hue over the Tuscan hills, its warmth a gentle reminder of the life that thrived within the walls of Casaluce. The villa, once a silent testament to time's passage, now pulsed with creativity and purpose. Elena stood by the window of her studio, watching as the morning light danced across the olive groves. Her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and anticipation. Marcus entered the room, his presence grounding her thoughts. "The gallery in New York confirmed the exhibition dates," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "They want to feature your latest collection." Elena turned to him, her eyes reflecting both joy and apprehension. "It's an incredible opportunity," she acknowledged, "but it also means stepping back into a world I left behind." He approached her, taking her hands in his. "You've transformed Casaluce into a haven for artists. Sharing your work with the world is a natural extension of that journey." She nodded, drawing strength from his confidence. "Then let's embrace this new chapter together." Preparations for the exhibition began in earnest. The villa buzzed with activity as artists and staff rallied to support Elena's endeavor. Canvases were carefully selected, each telling a story of transformation and resilience. The collection, aptly titled Rebirth, encapsulated the essence of Casaluce and its impact on those who found solace within its walls. As the departure date approached, Elena found herself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. The prospect of returning to New York stirred memories of a life once lived, of choices made and paths not taken. Yet, she recognized that this journey was not a retreat into the past, but a bold step into the future. Upon arrival in the city, the contrast was stark. The towering skyscrapers and bustling streets stood in sharp relief to the serene landscapes of Tuscany. Elena navigated the familiar terrain with a renewed sense of purpose, her experiences at Casaluce imbuing her with a quiet confidence. The gallery buzzed with anticipation on the night of the opening. Patrons, critics, and fellow artists gathered to witness the unveiling of Rebirth. As Elena moved through the crowd, she was met with expressions of admiration and curiosity. Each painting resonated with viewers, evoking emotions that transcended language. Marcus observed from a distance, his heart swelling with pride. He saw in Elena not just the artist, but the woman who had breathed life into a dream they now shared. Their eyes met across the room, a silent affirmation of their journey. In the days that followed, the exhibition garnered critical acclaim. Reviews praised Elena's ability to capture the human experience with authenticity and depth. Offers for collaborations and commissions poured in, each presenting new possibilities. Yet, amidst the accolades, Elena remained grounded. She recognized that the true success lay not in the recognition, but in the connections forged through her art. Each piece was a testament to the transformative power of creativity and the sanctuary that Casaluce provided. As their time in New York drew to a close, Elena and Marcus reflected on the path ahead. They envisioned expanding Casaluce's reach, establishing satellite residencies in cities around the world. The goal was to create spaces where artists could find inspiration and community, mirroring the ethos of their Tuscan haven. Returning to Italy, they were greeted by the familiar embrace of the villa. The warmth of the hearth, the laughter of resident artists, and the scent of blooming lavender welcomed them home. Elena resumed her role as both creator and curator, her experiences enriching the tapestry of Casaluce. In the quiet moments, she often found herself in the studio, brush in hand, translating emotions onto canvas. Marcus, ever her steadfast partner, continued to balance his corporate responsibilities with his commitment to their shared vision. Together, they nurtured a community that celebrated authenticity, fostered growth, and championed the transformative power of art. Casaluce stood as a beacon of hope, its light reaching far beyond the rolling hills of Tuscany. And so their journey continued, not as an end, but as an ever-evolving narrative of love, resilience, and the enduring magic of dreams realized. As spring settled softly over Tuscany, a letter arrived at Casaluce bearing a seal that neither Elena nor Marcus had seen in years, the insignia of Coldwell International's Board of Trustees. Marcus opened it with a practiced calm, but his eyes sharpened as he scanned the contents. The board, unsettled by the company's shift toward artistic philanthropy under Marcus's leadership, had called for an emergency meeting in Zurich. Rumors swirled that a coalition of conservative investors was preparing to oust him from the company entirely. The news hit like a storm across the still waters of their life. For Marcus, it was not just a corporate threat, It was a challenge to everything he had built alongside Elena. His transformation from a disillusioned heir into a visionary leader had never sat well with those clinging to profit-driven legacy. Now they were moving to erase his influence. Elena stood by his side, unwavering, but she knew this wasn't just Marcus's battle. If he returned to Zurich, the path forward would demand a choice: defend his stake in Caldwell, potentially at the cost of their sanctuary, or walk away completely, leaving power and influence behind to preserve the purity of Casalus. As they prepared for Zurich, tension mounted. Would Marcus capitulate to corporate politics? Or would he risk everything, including financial security and legacy, to protect the life they had nurtured? The day of the board meeting arrived. Marcus stood before a room of skeptical faces, investors who only saw numbers where he saw purpose. But with Elena watching from the hallway, he made a speech that would redefine not just the future of Caldwell, but the future of philanthropy. "We can build an empire that uplifts rather than exploits," Marcus declared, voice firm. "Caldwell doesn't need to return to its past. It can lead the future by investing in humanity, in beauty, in connection." The vote was close, but in a stunning turn, a new ally, a quiet board member inspired by Casalus's model, cast the deciding vote in Marcus's favor. The room erupted. Marcus remained at the helm, but now with the mandate to expand their vision globally. As they flew back to Florence, Marcus turned to Elena. "This was never just about the company," he said. "It's about proving that love, art, and purpose can transform even the coldest halls of power." Their story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. If this journey moved you, inspired you, or simply made you believe in second chances, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support gives us the motivation to bring you more stories of love, ambition, and the beautiful mess of being human. Stay tuned for what comes next.